Commander Elena Vasquez stared at the rejection notice glowing on her tablet, her coffee growing cold in the cramped quarters of Mining Station Erebus. After 15 years of distinguished service in the Terran Defense Corps, she had been passed over for promotion again. The reason cited was always the same: lacks the ruthless decisiveness required for high command. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a galaxy where humans were considered the weakest of the major species, their military leaders were expected to compensate with brutality. The Korthak Empire ruled through fear and overwhelming force. The Zilani Confederation maintained order through calculated political manipulation. The crystalline Vex simply absorbed whatever opposed them. Humans, with their average lifespans, moderate physical capabilities, and tendency toward emotional decision-making, were tolerated in the Galactic Council only because they controlled several resource-rich systems. Elena had built her career on a different philosophy. She studied the ancient Terran strategist Machiavelli, not for his reputation of cunning cruelty, but for his deeper understanding of power dynamics. True strength, she believed, came from knowing when to be merciful and when to be firm, when to show vulnerability, and when to project invincibility. But in a military culture that valued the hammer over the scalpel, such nuanced thinking was seen as weakness. The communication alert chimed, interrupting her brooding. Admiral Chen's weathered face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. "Commander Vasquez, I have an assignment for you. It's not glamorous, and, frankly, it's probably career suicide." Elena straightened. "I'm listening, sir." "We've lost contact with a research station on Kepler 438b. It's deep in contested space, right on the border between our territory and the Korthak Empire. The station was working on something classified, something the brass considers vital to human interests." "What kind of research?" Admiral Chen paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Psychological warfare applications. The kind of thing that could level the playing field between us and the other species. The problem is we sent Captain Morrison and his team to investigate 3 weeks ago. They haven't reported back either." Elena felt a chill. Morrison was known throughout the fleet as a by-the-book officer who never missed a scheduled communication. If he had gone silent, something had gone very wrong. "What's my mission, sir?" "Take the frigate Resilience and a small crew. Find out what happened to Morrison's team and secure whatever research was being conducted. But here's the catch. Intelligence suggests the Korthak may have moved ships into the area. If they've claimed the station, you're authorized to negotiate." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Elena understood. The Admiralty was sending her because they expected her to fail. If she died heroically trying to complete an impossible mission, she would be remembered as a martyr. If she somehow succeeded through diplomacy rather than firepower, they could claim credit for innovative thinking. Either way, they were rid of a commander who didn't fit their vision of human military leadership. "Understand, sir. When do we depart?" "Immediately. Your crew is already being assembled. Commander, I want you to know that while the other admirals see this as a convenient way to sideline you, I believe you might be exactly what this mission needs. The galaxy is changing, and maybe it's time our approach changed with it." Elena nodded, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "I won't disappoint you, sir." 3 hours later, she stood on the bridge of the Resilience, a sleek but aging frigate that had seen better days. Her crew was small but experienced. Lieutenant Marcus Torres at navigation, Ensign Yuki Tanaka handling communications, Chief Engineer Pavel Volkov maintaining the aging systems, and Dr. Sarah Chun serving as both medical officer and xenobiologist. As they cleared the station's docking bay and entered hyperspace, Elena reviewed the classified files on her personal tablet. The Kepler station had been researching something called Project Mirror, an investigation into the psychological profiles of different species and how those profiles could be exploited in conflict situations. The research team had been led by Dr. James Wright, a brilliant but controversial scientist who had published papers on interspecies manipulation techniques. "Commander," Ensign Tanaka called from her station. I'm picking up some unusual electromagnetic signatures along our route. Could be natural phenomena, but it could also be ships trying to mask their presence. Elena finished. How long until we reach the Kepler system? 18 hours at current speed. Elena studied the tactical display, noting the positions of known Korthak patrol routes. The massive insectoid Korthak were known for their aggressive territorial behavior and their tendency to shoot first and never bother asking questions later. If they had discovered the research station, they would either have destroyed it outright or claimed it for their own purposes. Lieutenant Torres, plot a course that keeps us in the shadow of the gas giant until we can get a better read on the situation. I want to know what we're walking into before we announce our presence. Aye, Commander. Dr. Chin approached Elena's command chair. Commander, I've been reviewing the research files. This Project Mirror, it's not just about psychological warfare. Dr. Wright was studying something much more fundamental, the concept of perceived weakness versus actual capability. According to his notes, he believed that humanity's reputation as the weak link in galactic politics might actually be our greatest strategic advantage. Elena looked up with interest. How so? Think about it from a game theory perspective. Every species in the galaxy underestimates us. They see our emotional responses as weakness, our diplomatic tendencies as naivety, our technological limitations as proof of our inferiority. But what if those perceived weaknesses could be turned into strengths? What if we could use their expectations against them? The idea resonated with Elena's understanding of Machiavellian strategy. The prince had written extensively about the value of being underestimated, about how apparent weakness could mask true capability until the moment of decisive action. Dr. Wright was essentially trying to weaponize the galaxy's misconceptions about humanity, she mused. Exactly. And if the Korthak have gotten their hands on this research? Elena didn't need her to finish the thought. If the warlike Korthak learned to manipulate galactic perceptions the way humans naturally could, they would become unstoppable. Their natural aggression, combined with sophisticated psychological warfare capabilities, would tip the balance of power decisively in their favor. Commander, Lieutenant Torres called out. We're approaching the edge of the Kepler system. Passive sensors are picking up multiple contacts near the research station. Elena moved to the tactical display, studying the scattered dots of light representing unknown vessels. Configuration analysis? At least 3 Korthak heavy cruisers in defensive positions around the station. But there's something else. I'm reading human energy signatures. Faint, but definitely there. Elena felt her pulse quicken. If Morrison and his team were still alive, time was running out. The Korthak weren't known for keeping prisoners for extended periods. Options, people. How do we approach this without starting an interspecies war? Chief Engineer Volkov spoke up from his station. The resilience might not be much to look at, but she's got one advantage. Her stealth systems are newer than anything the Korthak have seen. We could get close enough for a detailed scan before they detect us. And then what? Dr. Chin asked. Even if we locate our people, we can't fight 3 heavy cruisers with a single frigate. Elena studied the display, her mind working through possibilities. The conventional approach would be to call for reinforcements and attempt a military solution. But that would take days they didn't have, and it would likely escalate into a major conflict. There had to be another way. Ensign Tanaka, can you determine if the Korthak are jamming communications to and from the station? Scanning now. Yes, Commander. Full spectrum jamming. Nothing's getting in or out. Elena smiled grimly. The Korthak assumption would be that they had eliminated all human presence in the system. They wouldn't be expecting a diplomatic approach because they believed there was no one left to negotiate with. Here's what we're going to do, she announced to her crew. We're going to give them exactly what they expect, and then we're going to show them why underestimating humans is a mistake. As the resilience moved deeper into the shadow of the gas giant, Elena began formulating a plan that would have made Machiavelli himself proud. The key was not to fight the Korthak perception of human weakness, but to embrace it completely, right up until the moment when that perceived weakness became devastatingly real strength. The first phase of her plan would require her to do something that went against every instinct in her military training. She would have to surrender to the enemy, allow herself to appear utterly defeated and helpless. But within that apparent defeat lay the seeds of victory, if she could play the game better than her opponents expected. Dr. Wright's research might have been captured by the Korthak, but Elena was about to provide them with a practical demonstration of why human weakness was actually humanity's greatest weapon. The insectoid warriors were about to learn that sometimes the greatest strength came from acknowledging one's limitations and then transcending them completely. As the massive Korthak vessels grew larger on the view screen, Elena felt the familiar calm that came before decisive action. She had spent her career being told she wasn't ruthless enough for command. Today, she would show the galaxy that true ruthlessness sometimes wore the face of compassion, and that the most devastating attacks often came from those who appeared to have already lost. The game was about to begin, and Elena Vasquez intended to rewrite the rules entirely. Elena watched the tactical display as the Korthak vessels adjusted their positions. The insectoid species moved their ships in precise geometric patterns, a reflection of their hive mind mentality and rigid military doctrine. Each heavy cruiser was positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire around the research station, creating an impenetrable defensive sphere. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres whispered, "we're well within their sensor range now. If we move any closer, they'll detect us for sure." Elena nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. She had spent the last hour studying the Korthak formation, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that might give her an advantage. What she had found was both encouraging and terrifying. "Dr. Chun," she called softly, "you said the Korthak operate on a strict hierarchy, correct? Their command structure is based on physical dominance and proven combat effectiveness." "That's right. They respect strength above all else. In their culture, showing weakness or uncertainty is essentially a death sentence. Their commanders maintain authority through constant displays of superiority." Elena smiled, an expression that would have worried anyone who knew her well. "Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." She turned to address her crew. "I'm going to share my plan with you, but I want everyone to understand something first. What I'm about to propose goes against everything we've been taught about military engagement. It's going to require each of you to trust me completely, even when it looks like I've lost my mind." Chief Engineer Volkov raised an eyebrow. "Commander, with respect, that doesn't sound particularly reassuring." "It's not supposed to be." Elena moved to the center of the bridge. "The Korthak expect us to behave like typical humans, emotional, unpredictable, prone to desperate gambits when cornered. They've studied our military tactics for decades, and they know how we usually respond to overwhelming force." She activated the main display, showing a detailed scan of the Korthak formation. "But here's what they don't understand about us. Our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our firepower. It's our ability to adapt, to think beyond established patterns, to find solutions that no one expects. The research Dr. Wright was conducting proves this. We've been underestimated by every major species in the galaxy, and somehow we've not just survived but thrived." Ensign Tanaka looked confused. "So what's your plan, Commander?" Elena took a deep breath. "We're going to surrender to them, completely and unconditionally." The bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Torres stared at her as if she had announced plans to ram the nearest cruiser. "Commander," he began carefully, "I'm not sure that's... Let me finish." Elena's voice carried the quiet authority that had earned her crew's respect over the years. "We surrender, but not the way they expect. We're going to give them exactly what their psychology demands, a clear demonstration of their superiority over weak, defeated humans. And in doing so, we're going to walk right through their defenses." Dr. Chun was beginning to understand. "You're talking about psychological manipulation on a massive scale, using their own cultural biases against them." "Exactly. The Korthak can't conceive of surrender as anything other than total defeat. In their society, if you surrender, you become property of your conqueror. You're expected to be broken, terrified, completely subservient. They won't be looking for tricks from a defeated enemy, because defeated enemies don't have the will to resist. Chief Volkov nodded slowly. So we play into their expectations completely. Make ourselves appear so pathetic and broken that they don't see us as a threat. More than that, Elena continued, we make them feel so superior, so completely dominant, that their guard comes down entirely. We become invisible through sheer insignificance. She moved back to the tactical display, highlighting specific points on the Korthak formation. Here's how it works. We approach on a direct vector, engines damaged, weapons offline, communications arrays destroyed. We transmit a standard distress signal that makes it clear we're no threat to anyone. When they board us, I take full responsibility for the mission. I act like a broken commander who's led her crew to certain death. And then? Lieutenant Torres asked. Then we wait. Korthak commanders are notorious for their need to demonstrate dominance over defeated enemies. They'll want to interrogate me personally, probably in front of their senior staff. It's a ritual for them, a way of reinforcing their superiority. But while they're focused on their victory ceremony, we gather intelligence. Elena activated a secondary display showing the research station schematics. Dr. Wright's research included detailed psychological profiles of Korthak command structures. According to his notes, their boarding parties follow extremely rigid protocols. They'll secure our ship, establish a command post, and begin systematic interrogation. But they'll also want to show off their prize to their fleet commander. Dr. Chun was following the logic now, which means they'll transport you to their flagship for the formal surrender ceremony. Right. And that's when the real work begins. Ensign Tanaka, your job will be to plant monitoring devices while appearing to assist with their communications equipment. Lieutenant Torres, you'll be providing engineering support while mapping their ship systems. Chief Volkov, you'll be maintaining our damaged engines while actually preparing them for emergency extraction. The crew exchanged glances, beginning to see the complexity of the plan. Dr. Chun, Elena continued, you'll be the key to the whole operation. The Korthak will expect our ship's doctor to tend to their wounded boarding party members. It fits their concept of defeated enemies being forced to serve their conquerors. But while you're providing medical assistance, you'll be conducting psychological analysis of their command structure. Looking for weaknesses in their hierarchy, Dr. Chen realized. Exactly. Every military organization has internal tensions, competing agendas, officers who resent their superiors. The Korthak are no exception, they just hide it better. We find those fault lines and we exploit them. Ensign Tanaka raised her hand tentatively. Commander, what about the human survivors on the research station? If Captain Morrison and his team are still alive. Elena's expression grew serious. That's the ultimate goal of this entire operation. But we can't help them if we're dead or captured. The only way to reach them is by getting inside the Korthak defense network. And the only way to do that is by making ourselves appear completely harmless. She began outlining the specific details of each crew member's role in the deception. Every action had to be carefully choreographed to reinforce the image of defeated, broken humans who posed no threat to anyone. Remember, she emphasized, this only works if we sell it completely. The moment any of them suspect we're anything other than what we appear to be, we're all dead. You have to become the role you're playing. Feel the fear, the desperation, the resignation. Let it show in every gesture, every word. Lieutenant Torres looked uncomfortable. Commander, I have to ask, what if this doesn't work? What if they just decide to execute us, as an example? Elena met his gaze steadily. Then we die. But we die trying to save our people and protect humanity's interests. The alternative is to run back to Fleet Command and watch while the Korthak use Dr. Wright's research to manipulate every species in the galaxy. Is that really a better option? The bridge fell quiet as each crew member considered the weight of their mission. They were about to attempt something that violated every principle of military engagement they had been taught. Success would require them to embrace apparent defeat so completely that their enemies would never suspect the truth. Dr. Chun, Elena said, I need you to prepare sedatives that will simulate the effects of interrogation drugs. Nothing dangerous, but enough to make me appear mentally broken when they question me. The more pathetic I seem, the more their guard will drop. Commander, Chief Alkov spoke up. There's something else we need to consider. What about our weapons? The Korthak will expect a human ship to be armed, even a small frigate like this one. Elena smiled grimly. We're going to give them our weapons. All of them. Completely voluntarily, as a gesture of our total surrender. It's the last thing they'll expect from humans, which makes it perfect for our purposes. She moved to her command chair and activated the ship's internal communications system. All hands, this is the commander. In approximately 30 minutes, we will be approaching 3 Korthak heavy cruisers with the intent to surrender. I know this sounds insane, but I need every person on this ship to trust me completely. We are not giving up. We are not abandoning our mission. We are simply changing the battlefield to one where we have the advantage. The comm system crackled with responses from various departments, all acknowledging their understanding despite obvious confusion. Elena turned back to her bridge crew. Remember, the Korthak see surrender as the ultimate expression of weakness. They can't conceive of it being used as a tactic because it goes against everything they believe about strength and power. That blind spot is going to be our way in. Beginning approach vector, Lieutenant Torres announced. Engines cycling down to minimal power, weapons systems going offline. Ensign Tanaka, initiate distress beacon. Standard human emergency protocols. Make it clear we're requesting assistance, not attempting to fight. Dr. Chun, prepare medical supplies for treating both human and Korthak casualties. Make it obvious that you're ready to provide aid to anyone who needs it. As the Resilience limped toward the Korthak formation, Elena felt the familiar calm that preceded decisive action. She was about to put her understanding of power dynamics to the ultimate test. Machiavelli had written that it was better to be feared than loved, but he had also understood that sometimes the most effective strategy was to appear so harmless that your enemies ignored you completely. The game was about to begin, and Elena Vasquez was betting everything on her belief that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weapons or their technology, but in their ability to see possibilities that others missed entirely. The Korthak were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one who had already surrendered. On the main display, the alien vessels grew larger with each passing moment, their insectoid designs radiating menace and barely contained violence. In a few minutes, Elena would be face to face with creatures who viewed her species as weak, emotional, and ultimately inferior. She was about to show them just how wrong they were. The first Korthak boarding shuttle docked with the Resilience with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship's corridors. Elena stood in the main airlock, her uniform disheveled, her hands visibly trembling as she held a formal surrender document. Behind her, her crew maintained perfect positions of defeat, heads down, weapons discarded, body language screaming of broken morale. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere. The first Korthak warrior through the hatch stood nearly 8 feet tall, its chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the ship's emergency lighting. For arms ending in razor-sharp claws, compound eyes that missed nothing, mandibles that clicked with barely contained aggression. War leader Threxka, according to the intelligence files Elena had memorized. I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Corps, she said, her voice carefully modulated to show exhaustion and defeat. I formally surrender my ship and crew to your authority. Threxka's mandibles clicked in what Elena recognized as amusement. The Korthak language was partially gestural, and she had spent years studying their communications patterns. The war leader was already dismissing her as a threat. Human weak thing, Threxka buzzed in accented standard galactic. You bring pathetic vessel into our territory. You will explain purpose, or you will die slowly. Elena allowed her shoulders to slump further. We were sent to investigate the research station. We didn't know you were here. Our orders were to retrieve any survivors and return to human space. She let her voice crack slightly. I failed my crew. I've led them to their deaths. The emotional display had exactly the effect she had hoped for. Threxka's posture shifted to one of complete dominance, his forearms spreading wide in the Korthak gesture of superior status. To the insectoid warrior, Elena was behaving exactly as a defeated inferior should, taking responsibility for failure, showing regret for her weakness, accepting her fate. You will come to Battleship Dominator, Threxka announced. Fleet Commander Zekta will decide if you live or die. Your crew things will remain here under guard. Elena nodded meekly. Of course. I understand. She turned to her crew, making sure her voice carried the right note of desperate resignation. Do exactly what they tell you. Don't give them any reason to hurt you. Dr. Chun stepped forward, her medical bag visible in her hands. Please, I'm their doctor. If any of your warriors are injured, I can help. I have medical supplies, pain relievers. She let her voice trail off, the perfect picture of a caregiver trying to be useful to her captors. Threxka's compound eyes focused on her. In Korthak culture, offering medical aid to an enemy was seen as the ultimate submission, an acknowledgement that the enemy's well-being was more important than your own dignity. It reinforced every stereotype they held about human weakness. Dr. Thing may tend to injured warriors, he decided. Show proper respect or die. As the boarding party secured the ship, Elena observed their procedures with the trained eye of a military analyst. Everything was proceeding exactly as Dr. Wright's research had predicted. The Korthak were following rigid protocols, their movements precise and predictable. More importantly, they were relaxed. In their minds, they had captured a broken human vessel with no capacity for resistance. Lieutenant Torres caught her eye briefly, and she saw the question there. So far, everything was going according to plan, but they were walking deeper into enemy territory with each passing moment. Elena gave him the slightest nod. Trust the plan, stay in character. The transfer to the Korthak flagship took 20 minutes. Elena spent the time in a detention cell aboard the shuttle, using the opportunity to study the alien vessel's construction and crew interactions. The Korthak were proud of their ship, showing it off to their prisoner with the casual arrogance of superior beings displaying their dominance. The Dominator was a massive vessel, its interior designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Everything was built to Korthak scale, making Elena feel small and vulnerable as she was escorted through corridors lined with warrior caste soldiers. The psychological effect was intentional. Enemies brought aboard Korthak ships were supposed to feel their own insignificance. Fleet Commander Zekta waited in what the humans would call a throne room, though the Korthak term translated more accurately to dominance chamber. The fleet commander was even larger than Threxka, his exoskeleton bearing the scars of countless battles. Around him stood his senior officers, their posture indicating their positions in the rigid Korthak hierarchy. Elena was forced to her knees before the massive alien, a humiliation that would have enraged most human military officers. But Elena had studied Machiavelli extensively, and she understood that sometimes true power required the appearance of complete powerlessness. Human commander thing, Zekta buzzed, his voice carrying harmonics that hurt Elena's ears. You trespass in Korthak space. You seek to steal what belongs to the Empire. Explain why you should not be executed as example to others. Elena raised her head slowly, making sure her expression showed the right combination of fear and desperate hope. Fleet Commander, I was following orders. We didn't know the research station was in your territory. If I had known, I would never have brought my crew into danger. She paused, letting her voice strengthen slightly as if drawing on hidden reserves of courage. But I have information that might be valuable to the Empire. The research being conducted on that station, it wasn't just about human interests. It was about understanding all the species in the galaxy, including the Korthak. Zekta's mandibles clicked with interest. Explain this research. Dr. Wright was studying psychological warfare applications. Elena continued, her voice becoming more confident as she spoke. He believed that every species had psychological weaknesses that could be exploited in conflict. Humans, Jelani, bugs. She paused dramatically, and Korthak, the throne room, fell silent. Elena could feel the tension in the air as the Korthak officers processed this information. She was walking a narrow line, providing information that seemed valuable while actually setting up the larger deception. This Dr. Thing, Zekth growled, he studied Korthak warriors. Elena nodded eagerly, playing the role of a desperate prisoner trying to bargain for her life. Yes, he had extensive files on Korthak psychology, command structures, cultural weaknesses. He believed that understanding your species was key to... She let her voice trail off, as if realizing she was saying too much. Key to what? Threxka demanded from beside the throne. Elena bit her lip, the perfect picture of someone who had revealed more than intended. To developing countermeasures. Defensive strategies. The human military wanted to know how to protect our colonies if the Empire ever expanded into our territory. It was a brilliant lie because it contained enough truth to be believable. The Korthak would naturally assume that weaker species would focus on defensive measures rather than offensive capabilities. It played into their conception of humans as inherently reactive rather than proactive. Zekta leaned forward, his compound eyes fixed on Elena's face. This research exists still? On the station? Yes, Fleet Commander. All of Dr. Wright's files are in the station's central computer core, but they're encrypted with human security protocols. Only someone with the proper access codes could retrieve them. She was giving them exactly what they wanted to hear, valuable intelligence that was tantalizingly close but just out of reach. It was the perfect bait for creatures who value dominance and control above all else. You have these access codes? Zekta asked. Elena hesitated, as if weighing her options. I have authorization to access classified research files. But, Fleet Commander, if I help you, what happens to my crew? They're good people. They don't deserve to die for my mistakes. The plea for mercy was another perfect touch. It reinforced the Korthak perception of humans as emotional, caring about subordinates to the point of weakness. In Korthak culture, a commander who prioritized crew safety over mission success was demonstrating fundamental unfitness for command. Your crew things live if information proves valuable, Zekta decided. If you deceive us, all die slowly. Elena bowed her head. Understand. I'll do whatever you require. As she was escorted to a holding cell to await transport back to the research station, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The first phase of her plan had succeeded perfectly. The Korthak saw her exactly as she wanted them to, a broken commander trying to save her crew by cooperating with superior forces. But while they were focused on the intelligence treasure she had offered them, they were completely missing the real game being played. Dr. Chun would be analyzing their ship's systems under the guise of treating wounded warriors. Lieutenant Torres would be mapping their defensive networks while appearing to assist with technical repairs. Chief Volkov would be learning everything about their propulsion systems while supposedly helping to maintain the captured human vessel. Most importantly, Elena was now inside their command structure, positioned to observe their decision-making processes firsthand. She was learning how they thought, how they planned, where their blind spots lay. Every moment of apparent captivity was actually gathering intelligence that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Korthak believed they had captured a valuable prisoner and gained access to important research. In reality, they had invited their greatest weakness aboard their most important ships. They had handed their enemies the keys to their own defeat, all because they could not conceive of surrender as anything other than total submission. As Elena sat in her cell, preparing for the next phase of her plan, she reflected on Machiavelli's most important lesson. The art of war was not about being the strongest or the most ruthless. It was about understanding your enemy so completely that you could predict their every move, manipulate their every decision, and turn their greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The Korthak were about to receive a masterclass in human strategic thinking. and by the time they realized what was happening, it would be far too late to stop it. In the research station's computer cores, Dr. Wright's files weighted with secrets that went far beyond anything Elena had told her captors. The real treasure wasn't information about psychological warfare. It was a complete understanding of humanity's true place in the galactic ecosystem. And that understanding was about to change everything. The research station hung in space like a metallic spider web, its modular sections connected by transit tubes that gleamed under the system's distant star. Elena stood on the observation deck of the Korthak shuttle, flanked by War Leader Threxka and 2 other senior officers, watching as they approached the station where everything had begun. Human station shows damage, observed Subcommander Vector, pointing to what appeared to be blast marks along the outer hull. Your Captain Morrison thing resisted. Chose death over submission. Elena forced herself to show appropriate distress at the news. Though her trained, I was already analyzing the damage patterns. The blast marks were too precise, too localized. They looked like deliberate modifications rather than battle damage. Captain Morrison was cleverer than the Korthak realized. How many of my people are still alive? She asked, injecting her voice with the right mixture of hope and dread. 3 humans survive, Threxka replied dismissively. Dr. Scientist and 2 guard things. They will serve Empire interests or join their dead commander thing. 3 survivors out of Morrison's team of 12. Elena felt genuine anger flare beneath her facade of defeated cooperation, but she channeled it into apparent grief and resignation. The emotional display satisfied the Korthak officers, confirming their belief that she was psychologically broken by her situation. The shuttle docked with the station's main bay, and Elena was escorted through corridors that showed signs of hasty Korthak modifications. Emergency lighting had been replaced with the harsh, flickering illumination preferred by insectoid eyes. Temperature controls had been adjusted to Korthak preferences, making the air uncomfortably warm and humid for humans. But Elena noticed details that her escorts missed. Subtle modifications to wall panels that could hide communication equipment. Changes to ventilation systems that might allow for hidden movement through the station. Someone had been preparing contingencies, and Elena suspected she knew who. The central computer core was located in the station's heavily shielded heart, a chamber designed to survive even direct weapon impacts. As they approached the entrance, Elena saw Captain Morrison for the first time. He was secured to a chair before the main computer terminal, his uniform torn and stained, his face bearing the marks of interrogation. But his eyes were alert, and when he saw Elena, she caught a flicker of communication that the Korthak missed entirely. Morrison knew exactly what he was doing. Captain, Elena said, allowing her voice to break with emotion. I'm so sorry. I failed everyone. Morrison raised his head slowly, his gaze meeting hers. Commander Vasquez, I should have expected they'd send you to clean up my mess. His voice carried bitter resignation, but Elena heard the subtle emphasis on certain words. He was confirming that he had left her the tools she would need. Fleet Commander Zektha had accompanied them to the station, determined to personally oversee the extraction of human research secrets. His massive form dominated the computer chamber as he gestured toward the terminal. Access files, he commanded Elena. Show human intelligence to Korthak Empire. Elena approached the terminal slowly, her hands appearing to shake with nervousness. The security protocols are complex, she explained. Dr. Wright was paranoid about protecting his research. It will take me several minutes to bypass the safeguards. What she didn't mention was that Morrison had already provided her with exactly the tool she needed. His apparent capture had been a carefully orchestrated deception, allowing him to modify the station's systems without Korthak interference. The blast damage they had seen was cover for extensive internal renovations. As Elena's fingers moved across the interface, she began uploading a program that Morrison had left hidden in the system's core processes. To the watching Korthak, she appeared to be struggling with security encryption. In reality, she was activating a comprehensive surveillance network that would monitor every Korthak communication, map their fleet positions, and identify their command protocols. Files accessing, she announced, as false data began appearing on the screens around the chamber. Dr. Wright's psychological profiles of all galactic species. The information she was showing them was real, but carefully edited. Accurate enough to maintain credibility, but missing the crucial insights that would actually be useful in psychological warfare. The Korthak officers studied the displays with obvious interest, their mandibles clicking with satisfaction as they saw detailed analysis of Zalani political structures and Vex collective consciousness patterns. "Where are Korthak files?" Zekta demanded, his compound eyes fixed on the scrolling data. "Here," Elena said, activating another section of the display. Dr. Wright's analysis of Korthak warrior psychology and command hierarchies. The files she showed them were masterworks of misdirection. They presented the Korthak exactly as they saw themselves, perfectly organized, utterly rational, driven by pure logic and dominance instincts. Every weakness or vulnerability had been carefully removed or disguised. The Korthak read analysis that confirmed their own superiority while completely missing their actual psychological blind spots. But while the aliens focused on the false intelligence, Elena's real program was working in the background. It was mapping their communication networks, analyzing their security protocols, and, most importantly, it was preparing to upload a devastating surprise to every Korthak ship in the system. This information proves human weakness, Frexka observed, studying the fabricated files. Your species understands inferiority of your position, wise to submit to superior forces. Elena nodded meekly. Dr. Wright believed that cooperation between species was more beneficial than conflict. He thought understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses could lead to peaceful coexistence. The statement was another perfect manipulation. It reinforced the Korthak belief that humans were fundamentally weak, preferring negotiation to conflict. They could not conceive that this apparent weakness might actually be a sophisticated strategy for gaining advantage over stronger opponents. While the Korthak studied the false research files, Elena was completing the real mission. Morrison's modifications to the station had created a powerful transmission array capable of reaching every human colony within 50 light-years. More importantly, it could penetrate Korthak communication encryption and access their military networks. The program Elena had activated was now spreading through every Korthak vessel in the system, masquerading as routine maintenance updates. Within hours, it would give human intelligence complete access to enemy fleet movements, tactical plans, and strategic objectives. The Korthak would continue using their systems normally, never realizing that every decision they made was being monitored and analyzed by human observers. "Transfer complete," Elena announced, stepping back from the terminal. "All of Dr. Wright's research is now available to your scientists." Zekta studied the data streams with obvious satisfaction. "Human research will serve Empire interests. Your species proves useful despite weakness." Elena bowed her head in apparent acceptance of the compliment, though privately she was calculating the timeline for her next moves. The intelligence gathering program was active, but she still needed to secure the rescue of Morrison and the other survivors. More importantly, she needed to escape before the Korthak realized what had actually been transferred to their systems. "Fleet Commander," she said carefully, "my crew and I have provided everything you requested. I hope this proves our cooperation and value to the Empire." "Your crew things live," Zekta decided after a moment of consideration. "Dr. Thing Morrison and others will remain to assist with research analysis. You will return to human space and inform your leaders of Korthak generosity." Elena felt a chill. She had expected this possibility, but it created complications for her extraction plan. She couldn't leave Morrison and the others behind, but she also couldn't reveal her true intentions without compromising everything they had accomplished. "Fleet Commander," she said, allowing desperation to creep into her voice. "Dr. Morrison has been through terrible trauma. As his commanding officer, I feel responsible for his well-being. Perhaps I could remain to ensure his cooperation while my crew returns to report our success." It was a dangerous gambit, offering to extend her own captivity to protect her people. But it played perfectly into Korthak's psychology. They respected the concept of a commander taking responsibility for subordinates, even if they viewed it as a weakness. Zektha considered the proposal, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. You will remain. Your crew things will carry message to human leaders. Cooperation with Empire brings reward. Resistance brings destruction. Elena nodded gratefully. Thank you, Fleet Commander. I'll make sure Dr. Morrison cooperates fully with your research teams. As the Korthak officers began making arrangements for her crew's departure, Elena caught Morrison's eye again. He gave her the slightest nod, confirming that he understood the situation and was ready for whatever came next. The real game was about to begin. Elena had successfully infiltrated the enemy command structure, planted comprehensive surveillance tools in their military networks, and positioned herself to coordinate the rescue of the survivors. The Korthak believed they had gained valuable intelligence and secured useful human cooperation. In reality, they had just handed their greatest enemies complete access to their most sensitive military secrets. Every tactical plan, every fleet movement, every strategic decision would now be monitored by human intelligence. The galaxy's perception of human weakness had blinded the Korthak to the possibility that they were being outmaneuvered by the very species they considered inferior. As Elena was escorted to quarters aboard the research station, now designated as a Korthak facility, she reflected on the irony of her situation. She was technically a prisoner, confined to enemy territory under constant surveillance. But she had also achieved something that conventional military force could never have accomplished: complete penetration of enemy intelligence networks without firing a single shot. The Korthak had taught her an important lesson about the nature of strength and weakness. They were physically superior, technologically advanced, and utterly committed to military dominance. But their very strength had become a weakness, blinding them to possibilities that lay outside their rigid worldview. Elena Vasquez had embraced her apparent weakness and turned it into devastating strength. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish when they stopped trying to match their enemy's strengths and started exploiting their enemy's assumptions instead. The revolution was about to begin, and the Korthak Empire would never see it coming. Elena had been confined to the research station for 6 days when everything changed. Her quarters were comfortable enough by prison standards, and her Korthak guards had grown complacent with routine. They saw her as a broken commander who had accepted her fate, spending her time reading research files and providing occasional assistance with human technological interfaces. What they didn't see was the careful preparation taking place beneath their mandible-clicking conversations. Morrison had been assigned to work with Korthak scientists analyzing human research data, but his real function was far more complex. Every day, he provided Elena with intelligence about ship rotations, guard schedules, and, most importantly, the growing dissatisfaction among the Korthak fleet crews. The psychological warfare program Elena had introduced into their networks was working better than she had dared hope. It wasn't causing obvious system failures or triggering security alerts. Instead, it was subtly analyzing and exploiting the natural tensions within Korthak military hierarchy. "Commander," Morrison whispered during one of their supervised meetings, "the surveillance network has identified something significant. There's a power struggle developing between Fleet Commander Zektha and War Leader Threxka." Elena maintained her appearance of defeated cooperation while processing this information. "What kind of struggle?" "Threxka believes Zektha is becoming too focused on intelligence gathering and not aggressive enough in expanding Korthak territory. He's been making private communications with other war leaders, questioning the fleet commander's strategic decisions." Elena felt a surge of excitement that she was careful not to show. This was exactly the kind of internal weakness that Dr. Wright's real research had predicted. The Korthak's rigid hierarchy was also their greatest vulnerability. Any disruption in command authority could cascade through their entire military structure. "Can we amplify this conflict?" she asked quietly. Morrison nodded. The surveillance program has been analyzing their communication patterns. I can introduce selective delays and modifications that will make each faction believe the other is undermining them. Nothing they can trace, just enough uncertainty to fuel their existing suspicions. Elena smiled grimly. Machiavelli had written extensively about the value of turning enemies against themselves. If she could trigger open conflict within the Korthak fleet, she might be able to accomplish her mission without firing a single shot. Do it, she decided, but carefully. We need them focused on each other, not looking for sabotage. Over the next 3 days, Elena watched with professional appreciation as the Korthak command structure began to unravel. Threxka's complaints about Zektha's leadership became more vocal. Other war leaders started choosing sides. Ship crews began showing signs of uncertainty about their orders. The beauty of the manipulation was its subtlety. Elena wasn't forcing artificial conflicts. She was simply amplifying natural tensions that already existed. The surveillance program identified keywords and emotional patterns in Korthak communications, then introduced tiny delays and selective message filtering that made each faction believe they were being deliberately excluded from important decisions. To outside observers, it appeared that the Korthak leadership was simply experiencing the normal power struggles that occurred in any military organization. But Elena recognized the signs of an empire eating itself from within. The critical moment came on the 7th day of her captivity. Elena was in the research station's central computer core, supposedly helping Korthak technicians analyze human encryption protocols when alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Threxka burst into the chamber, his 4 arms gesturing aggressively as he confronted the Korthak technicians. "Where is Zektha?" he demanded. "His ship has moved position without authorization from War Command." Elena looked up from her workstation with carefully simulated confusion. "Is there some kind of emergency?" she asked innocently. One of the Korthak technicians clicked his mandibles nervously. "Fleet reorganization," he explained. "Command authority being clarified." Elena understood immediately. The factional conflict she had helped foment was reaching a critical point. Zektha and Threxka were maneuvering their ships for what looked like an imminent confrontation, each claiming legitimate authority over the fleet. "Threxka," she said carefully, "perhaps I could help. Human analysis might provide a neutral perspective on the situation." The war leader's compound eyes focused on her. In normal circumstances, he would never have considered accepting advice from a human prisoner. But the stress of the developing crisis, combined with Elena's established pattern of cooperation and submission, made him receptive to any source of useful information. "Speak," he commanded. Elena stood slowly, projecting an image of someone trying to be helpful despite her powerless position. "From what I understand of Korthak military doctrine, command authority flows from proven superiority in combat. Has Fleet Commander Zektha demonstrated this superiority recently?" It was a carefully constructed question that played directly into Threxka's existing resentments. Elena was giving him intellectual justification for what he already wanted to do. "Zektha shows weakness," Threxka growled. "Focuses on intelligence gathering instead of expansion. Allows inferior species to influence Korthak decisions." He gestured toward Elena herself. "True war leader would have executed humans immediately. Claimed station for Empire." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Then, perhaps the crisis represents an opportunity to demonstrate proper Korthak leadership. Other war leaders would respect a commander who acted decisively when faced with weakness in the chain of command." She was walking a dangerous line, encouraging a military coup while maintaining her facade of helpful cooperation. But Elena understood that the Korthak respect for hierarchy also meant they respected those bold enough to challenge incompetent superiors. Threxka's mandibles clicked with obvious consideration of her words. Human advice proves interesting. Within an hour, Elena watched from the station's observation deck as the Korthak fleet began splitting into opposing factions. Threxka had convinced 2 other war leaders to support his challenge to Zektha's authority. The fleet commander had responded by ordering loyal ships to take defensive positions. What had begun as a subtle intelligence operation was about to become open warfare within the enemy fleet. Elena activated her concealed communicator, a device Morrison had hidden in her quarters days earlier. Phoenix to Nest, she transmitted on an encrypted human frequency. Package delivered. Recommend immediate collection. Admiral Chin's voice crackled through the static. Acknowledged, Phoenix. Collection team en route. How did you? Later, sir. Be advised that enemy forces are currently engaged in internal conflict. Window of opportunity may be limited. As Elena watched, the first shots were fired between Korthak vessels. Frexka's ships moved aggressively toward Zektha's flagship, energy weapons charging for full combat engagement. The research station shuddered as nearby vessels maneuvered for battle positions. Elena felt a moment of profound satisfaction. She had done exactly what every military manual said was impossible. She had defeated a superior enemy force without engaging them in direct combat. The Korthak fleet was destroying itself, driven by their own psychological weaknesses and manipulated by their own rigid adherence to hierarchical dominance. Morrison appeared beside her, along with the two other human survivors. "Commander," he said quietly, "the Korthak guards are focused on the fleet battle. Security protocols have been suspended while they try to figure out which faction they should support." Elena nodded. "Then it's time to leave." The escape from the research station was almost anticlimactic. The Korthak garrison was in complete disarray, with different units receiving conflicting orders from opposing fleet commanders. Elena and her people simply walked to the shuttle bay, activated an emergency evacuation pod, and launched while the alien ships were busy destroying each other. The rescue flotilla Admiral Chun had dispatched found them 6 hours later, drifting in space while watching the continuing battle between Korthak factions. Elena submitted her report while receiving medical attention, though she was careful to omit certain details about the intelligence programs still running in enemy systems. "Commander," Admiral Chin said during her debrief, "what you've accomplished here will change everything. Not just tactical intelligence, but proof that we don't have to match our enemy's strengths. We can use their weaknesses against them." Elena nodded, though her expression remained serious. "Admiral, this was just the beginning. The surveillance network we planted is still active in their systems. We'll be able to monitor Korthak military activities throughout this sector. But more importantly, we've proven that perceived weakness can be transformed into strategic advantage." Over the following weeks, as reports came in from the Kepler system, Elena watched her victory's full implications unfold. The Korthak fleet had virtually destroyed itself in the factional fighting. Frexka had killed Zektha in personal combat, but his own ships had suffered severe damage. The research station had been abandoned, its valuable intelligence now in human hands. But the real victory wasn't tactical, it was psychological. Word of the Korthak internal conflict spread throughout the galaxy, undermining their reputation for invincible unity. Other species began questioning whether the insectoid empire was as formidable as it appeared. Elena found herself promoted to admiral and assigned to head a new division focused on psychological warfare and strategic deception. Her first official act was to distribute copies of Machiavelli's The Prince to every human fleet commander, along with detailed analysis of how apparent weakness could be weaponized against enemies who underestimated human capabilities. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. Humans might not be the strongest species, or the most technologically advanced, or the most numerous, but they possess something that their enemies consistently failed to understand: the ability to see beyond surface appearances and find solutions that no one else would consider. Elena Vasquez had overcome her perceived weakness by embracing it completely, turning the galaxy's misconceptions about humanity into humanity's greatest strategic advantage. The revolution in human military thinking had begun, and it would change the balance of power among the stars forever. In her private moments, Elena often reflected on Machiavelli's greatest insight, that fortune favored not the bold or the strong, but those wise enough to adapt their strategies to changing circumstances. Humanity's time of being underestimated was ending. The galaxy was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped trying to be what others expected and started being exactly what the situation required. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human strategic superiority had begun.